Good day, viewers. Today, in this video class, let's look into the fact that earlier we are, as we are studying the xerophytes. In earlier classes, earlier video classes, we discussed about the xerophytes, their types, and various external morphological adaptive characters of xerophytes. Xerophytes are many. They grow usually in dry areas. These are also called as the plants of dry habitats. Pinus plant, cycas plant, equisetum plant, calotropes, then aloe vera, cacti, many cacti are good examples of the xerophytes. Commonly, the xerophytes are of two types: succulent xerophytes and non-succulent xerophytes. But earlier we discussed that xerophytes are categorized under three different headings, namely drought escaping xerophytes, drought enduring xerophytes, drought resisting xerophytes. True xerophytes are actually, they shows different external morphological adaptive characters, and internal adaptive characters are highly specialized. Let's discuss much more about the such internal adaptations. Internal adaptations means what? Internal anatomical adaptive characters of xerophytes. As such, the internal adaptive characters of their root is concerned. Root also shows highly specialized internal adaptive characters, especially in some of the xerophytes such as Pinus and the calotropes procera, calotropes. The internal, the roots in these plants, especially covered by the layer of the thick layer of the cork like the thick layer. This the covering of their roots in these plants actually protect the root from that is the accidental damages that may occur as the roots in these plants extensively develop, and they always as they go in search of the water. So in these plants, the root actually they develop the extra outer envelope, which is very thick, cork like, very thick, and then cork like layer is present around the root in these plants, that is in the Pinus and in the calotropes procera plant. This is one of the internal adaptation of the xerophyte. Still in some other plants, take for example in asparagus plant, asparagus. In this plant, it is the root of the plant which is somewhat as it contains the water containing tissue in them. The root especially store a lot of water. Water storage tissue is present in the root of the asparagus. This is also another the internal adaptation of the xerophytes. Not only the Pinus, calotropes and the asparagus shows such a very special internal adaptive character. Take for example, almost any of the true xerophytes that they grow in the xeric conditions in dry areas, dry habitats. The xerophytic roots internally they shows such a characters. They shows very well developed root hairs. Root hairs are abundantly present in the roots of the various xerophytes. With the help of these root hairs, the roots of the plant actually get a plenty of water. It is these root hairs actively participate in the process of the absorption of the water and other mineral salts which are present in the underground water, in the water that in their habitat itself. So very densely developed the root hairs are present in the roots of the various xerophytes. It is at another important internal adaptive character of the xerophytes. Abundant the root hairs are present in the majority of the xerophytes. Root hairs. So almost every xerophytes they shows very strong root system and extensively developed, much elaborated the root system. Root system in these plants it is very strong. It is these root of the plants they also protected by such a the thick cork-like the layer in some of the plants, as I already discussed earlier. Other than this, the roots of these plants also shows the presence of very well developed stelae. Stelae as it contain the vascular tissues, the xylem and then phloem. Xylem and then phloem, these two vascular tissues are very much well developed in the roots of the various xerophytes. The stelae is very well developed. As the stelae contain the xylem and the phloem, these two the vascular tissues are very much well developed in almost all the xerophytes. So this is about the root system, the internal adaptive character of the root, internal adaptation of the roots of the various xerophytes. Other than this, so such a kind of the root or the root system helps the plant to get plenty of water from the soil itself. The root hairs, the presence of the very compactly arranged the cortical cells of the root also provide the extra strength to the root, especially the cortical cells of the root are very much compactly arranged and are small. So such a very compactly arranged the cortical cells of the root helps the plant as it provide the support to the root. Roots are very strongly they penetrate deep inside the soil in order to get the source of the water. So such a kind of the root system is present in various xerophytes. Other than this, let's go to study the stem. What kind of the internal adaptive characters are present in the stem of various xerophytes? The stem in keeping in our mind almost different xerophytes. The stem it is highly specialized. Morphologically or externally, the stem in different xerophytes it is covered by a very thick cuticle. It is sometimes highly lignified and thick cuticularized. Sometimes the layer of the silica, layer of the wax is present on the epidermis of the stem. And other than this, some of the xerophytes also they exhibit very strong woody tree trunk, very strong woody stem is present. Still in some of the xerophytes, it is the stem of the plant which is modified to store the lot of water, or in other words, which is modified as a pillowclade. Pillowclade, it is very thick and flattened, succulent the structure. It is the stem of the xerophytes which is modified to not only to store a lot of the water. Other than this, as it contains the water storage tissue in it, the stem which is modified into a pillow is also external morphological adaptive character of various xerophytes. As such, the internal adaptive characters of the stem of many of the xerophytes are concerned. The stem, as I already discussed, the epidermal cells or the epidermis of the stem, it shows the presence of very thick cuticle, and the thick cuticle, it is very much thick, highly lignified. Sometimes the presence of the silica layer, sometimes the presence of the layer of the wax is a very common feature in almost all the xerophytes. So the epidermal hairs are maybe simple or compound. So these epidermal hairs which are present on the surface of the stem helps the plant to reduce the excess loss of the water from the internal the tissue of the plant body. So the stem epidermis, it is very much thick, highly cuticularized, highly lignified, and the layer of the wax or silica is present. This is one of the very much important the internal adaptive character of the xerophyte. Other than this, in almost all the xerophytes, the epidermis, it is very much thick and it is highly developed or well developed epidermis is present, and whatever the trichomes or the hairs which are present on the epidermal cells are also highly important as they grow. As the xerophytes grow in a xeric conditions, these hairs not only prevent the excess loss of the water from the internal tissue of the plant, but also they protect the internal tissue of their plants in such a way that they protect from the irradiation or the high temperature which exists in their the xeric conditions. Then, other than the epidermis, just if we go deep inside the internal tissue of the stem, that is, if we cross the epidermis and enter into inside, that is in a hypodermal layer. The hypodermis is also very much well developed. Hypodermis is present in the stem of the xerophytes. So epidermis is well developed. Hypodermis is also well developed. Hypodermis is very much highly developed. Hypodermis may be a single layered, multi-layered, 2 to 3 layered or a multi-layered epidermis, hypodermis is present. This 2 to 3 layered hypodermis also help the plant to reduce the excess loss of the water from the internal tissue of the plant. Such a well developed hypodermis is present in the stem of the various xerophytes. Remember this one. Then in the stem of the xerophytes, the vascular tissues are also very much highly developed. The xylem and phloem are very much highly developed in the stems of the various xerophytes. Other than this, the thick layer of the bark is present. The thick layer of the bark is present around the stem of the various xerophytes. As I already mentioned, the stem also they shows not only the presence of the hairs around their surface, but also it shows the presence of the spicules or the spines or sometimes the thorns sometimes the thorns, which are very much hard and very much hard. So such a the modifications helps the plant to live in such a the xeric conditions. So this is about the internal adaptive characters of the xerophytes. That is about the stem adaptations, the internal adaptations of the stem of various xerophytes. Other than this, the roots and the stem, one must keep in mind that the epidermis of the surface of their body of the xerophytes, it is always highly cuticularized. Well developed epidermis is present. The surface of the epidermis, they shows the presence of the hairs or the trichomes. Then sometimes it is covered by the layer of the silica. Sometimes it is also covered by the layer of the wax. Sometimes whatever the secretion of that is the layer of the wax which is present on their body surface, it is economically very important. It is a product of the commercial value in some of the xerophytes. So these are highly specialized adaptive characters of the xerophytes. So take for example the epidermis, which is very much thick and highly cuticularized and highly lignified. This highly cuticularized multi-layered epidermis is also very common in the xerophytes. Epidermis in other the mesophytes, it is a single layer, but in xerophytes, epidermis is multi-layered. So this is a thick cuticle, the cuticle. Very much thick cuticle is present. Below this cuticle, we observe the presence of multi-layered epidermis. Also, we observe the presence of epidermal hairs. Okay. Dorsal surface of the leaves or stem, it is multi-layered and covered by a thick cuticle, and presence of the trichomes is also very common. Just below this the epidermis, the layer of hypodermis is present. Hypodermal cells are present, and below the hypodermal layer, we observe the presence of the spongy tissue. Below the spongy layer, the lower ventral epidermis is present. It is this lower ventral epidermis, we observe the presence of the stomata. Stomata are also highly specialized. Sunken stomata are present. Sunken stomata are present. Sunken stomata are present. Normal stomata exhibit kidney-shaped guard cells covered by subsidiary cells. Okay. These are normal stomata. But In xerophytes, sunken stomata are present. These sunken stomata usually situated deep inside the depressions or within the pit. It is the lower ventral epidermis of the leaf of the nerium. Take for example, in nerium, the non-succulent xerophyte, sunken stomata are present. This is a normal stomata. Normal stomata. These sunken stomata, deeply situated within the internal tissue of the leaf, in such a way that the lower ventral layer shows the presence of the sunken stomata. These sunken stomata, they never come into contact with the direct sunlight or the environmental air. Again, these sunken stomata protected by the hairs. Such a type of the sunken or a deeply situated stomata are observed in the leaves or even in the stems of the various xerophytes. If we take the section of the leaf of the nerium plant or the oleander plant, we certainly observe the presence of these sunken stomata on its ventral lower surface of the leaf, which are usually found to occur in the depressions or within the inner foldings, or that is internal folding of the lower ventral layer of the leaves of the nerium. Such a sunken stomata usually they never come into contact with the sunlight. Again, these are protected by the hairs. Okay. Other plant, take for example, it may be the casuarina plant. In casuarina plant, stomata are also sunken. So if we take the section of the stem or even the needle or nothing but the leaves of the casuarina plant, in the leaves or in the middle of the casuarina plant, we observe very specialized the depressions or the pits. Within these the depressions or the pits, there present the sunken stomata. Again, these stomata are protected by the epidermal hairs. Such a sunken stomata helps the xerophytes to check the excess, the rate of transpiration. They helps the plant to conserve water, or they helps the plant to save water, or they helps the plant to check the excess rate of transpiration. So transpiration occur very rapid under high temperature or under a high temperature. Usually, as these xerophytes found to occur in a xeric conditions where the high temperature exists, but they shows the presence of the sunken stomata instead of the normal stomata. Sunken stomata, they help the xerophytes to save water, to check the excess loss of the water from the internal tissue. So these sunken stomata are deeply situated within the depressions or the pits. Okay. Again, another point is that these sunken stomata, which are present in the succulent xerophytes, they never open during the daytime. They open at night. Means what? Stomatal moment, it is reverse in these group of the plants. In the mesophytes, opening of the stomata takes place during the daytime. Stomata in mesophytes open during daytime, they remain closed at night. But in these, the succulent xerophytes, stomata are sunken, they open during night, they remain closed at the daytime, during which very intensive sunlight or high temperature exists. So such a unusual the opening and closing of the stomata is observed in these group of the plants. What happens actually when they open their stomata at night, usually during a dark period of the daytime, during a dark period of the day, that is at night, usually low temperature exists. So such a unusual behavior of the movement of the stomata helps the plant to check the excess, the loss of water from the internal tissue of the plant. This is one of the physiological adaptation of the xerophyte. So sunken stomata are present. These sunken stomata are deeply situated in the deep the depression of the plant body or within the pits. So that is the ridges and furrows. In the furrow region, in the depression of the stem or the leaves, we observe the presence of the sunken stomata. These such a deeply situated sunken stomata never come into contact with the direct sunlight or the atmospheric air itself. So such a sunken stomata helps the plant to reduce excess loss of the water from the internal tissue of the leaf or a stem itself. Still, in many of the other xerophytes, stomata it is highly specialized. Usually, stomata shows the presence of one chamber known as a stomatal chamber. So, highly specialized stomata are observed in some of the xerophytes. That is, the stomata shows the presence of the two chambers. Suppose that this is the outer chamber, the epidermis or the cuticle. So the epidermal layer occur in this fashion here. So this is where the stomata. Okay, this is the subsidiary cells of the stomata. Okay, this is the inner chamber, the outer chamber. Okay, the other the layer itself. So this is nothing but the subsidiary cell. Okay, subsidiary cell of a stomata, like this. Such a kind of the stomata, very specialized stomata containing the two chambers, the outer chamber and the inner chamber. Outer chamber, this is the inner chamber, the outer chamber, the stomata. Such a the cuticle, the epidermis. Such a specialized stomata are present in other xerophytes. Presence of the sunken stomata, presence of the specialized stomata containing the two chambers is very common in the xerophytes. Remember, the true xerophytes actually shows the presence of these specialized the stomata in their stems, even in the leaves itself. As examples may be given here, the cycas plant, the equisedum plant. Cycas and equisedum plant, very interestingly, they shows the presence of the stomata containing the two chambers. The cycas plant and the equisedum plants shows the presence of the stomata, specialized stomata containing the outer chamber and the inner chamber. Such a stomata also helps the plant to check the excess, the loss of water from the internal tissue of the leaf or stem of the plant. In this way, they reduce the excess loss of the water from the internal tissue of the plant. So this helps them to live under such a extreme conditions in a dry habitats of the plant itself. Still, in some other plants, we also observe the presence of very specialized cells known as that is the motor cells, or in other words, the bulliform cells. These the bulliform cells or the motor cells found to occur in the epidermal layer. Suppose that this is epidermal cells. Some of the epidermal cells are somewhat like this, somewhat are larger and are bigger in size. Such the motor cells or the bulliform cells which are present in the epidermal layer of the leaves. The leaves in certain xerophytes, they are commonly termed as the rolling leaves. Whenever the surrounding air becomes very dry, whenever the temperature increases, they automatically roll up. For rolling up of the leaves, these motor cells helps the plant. Example, sugarcane plant. Sugarcane or a bamboo plant or a bamboo. So in these plants, rolling up of the leaves is associated with the presence of the motor cells in their leaves. Due to the presence of these motor cells in their leaves, the leaves epidermis, the leaves of these plants, they roll up during a dry period of the day. Again, they shows that is they enlarge whenever the environmental air or the conditions which are prevailing around the plant becomes when it becomes very cool, automatically again they enlarge, they unveil. So rolling up of the leaves is also observed in certain the xerophytes because of the presence of these the bulliform cells or the motor cells. Then as I discussed earlier, the root, stem, leaves, they shows very interesting the internal adaptive characters. As we are discussing about the internal adaptive characters of the xerophytes, the leaves especially shows the presence of the sunken stomata. Whatever the number of the stomata which are present on the epidermal layer of the leaves in xerophytes, it is means what? The stomatal index. It is usually higher than that of the stomatal index of the mesophytes. This means that number of stomata which are present on the epidermis in 1 square centimeter is usually more than that of the mesophytes. It is this reason. It is because of this reason the transpiration rate is also maximum. Transpiration rate is also high in case of the xerophytes. But instead of the normal stomata, sunken stomata are present. Because of these stomata, they shows excessive. They shows that is they check the rate of the transpiration. They do not lose their internal internal water. So this is another very interesting anatomical adaptive character of various xerophytes. Let's move to study the physiological adaptation. Physiological adaptation of the xerophytes. physiological adaptation. Keeping in mind not only a particular single xerophyte, keeping in mind almost all the different the xerophytes, maybe the succulent xerophyte or a non-succulent xerophyte. The physiological adaptation of the xerophytes is that stomatal index means what? Number of stomata which are present on the epidermal surface, epidermal area, it is higher than that of the mesophytes. So they shows the high rate of the transpiration than that of the mesophytes. The botanist, that is a Maximo, who observed that the xerophytes especially shows the high rate of the transpiration than that of the mesophytes. According to him, the stomatal index, that is number of stomata which are present in a square centimeter of the surface of the leaf, it is higher than that of the mesophytes. That is, the physiological adaptation is that some of the xerophytes, they shows the succulence in their leaves, in their stems, even in their the petioles, what is the exact the physiology exists behind the fact that why certain xerophytes develop a succulency in their stem or the leaves or the petiole of the leaves, or it may be the root itself. Okay, so here the physiology tells us that, physiology of these xerophytes tells us that the cell sap, as it contains the polysaccharides in this group of the plants, very they convert into a very fast, they convert into a polysaccharides. They get converted into a pentosans. These pentosans have a water binding property. These pentosans shows water binding property. Okay, the pentosan, the polysaccharides in these xerophytes, especially in the succulent xerophytes, get converted into a pentosans. The pentosans shows the water binding property. It is because of this property of the xerophytes. They develop a succulency in their leaf or in their the stem itself. The pentosans absorb more amount of the water. They become succulent, the thick and fleshy. They develop a succulence. So therefore, because of this reason, they develop a succulency. They become a succulency. Okay, this is one of the another important physiological adaptation of the xerophytes. Other than this, the polysaccharides into pentosans. Then these pentosans together with some nitrogenous compounds in the cell sap, actually they attract the water molecules. They store a lot of water. So for this reason they hold the water. Because of this reason, they develop a succulence in their leaves, stems, petioles. Okay, this is the physiological adaptation of the xerophytes. Some of the other physiological adaptation of the xerophytes are also mentioned, such that another experimental fact is that in the physiology of the succulent xerophyte, as I already mentioned, that the stomata remain open at night. They never open during a daytime. The stomatal movement, it is reverse what I have discussed earlier. In these succulent xerophytes, stomata open at night, they remain closed during a daytime. This unusual behavior of the stomatal opening and closing helps the plant to store our water, okay, in such a way that, take for example, stomata are sunken in these plants. Stomata open at night. Stomata open at night. Okay, and they close during a daytime. This helps the plant to reduce the excess loss of water from the internal tissue of the plant. As the stomata are sunken, they never contact the sunlight or the air. This is one thing. Another thing is that, suppose that this is the guard cell of the stomata. The cell sap. When these stomata open at night, transpiration due to the respiration of the cells of the stomata or the respiration of the cells of the subsidiary cells of the stomata, here what happens, acid metabolism takes place. The manufacturing of the acid takes place. Why these plants open their stomata at night? Because due to the metabolism, that is the acid metabolism, when they open at night, due to the deposition, due to the accumulation of the acids, due to the accumulation of the acids in the cytoplasm of the guard cells of the stomata, the osmotic concentration of the cell sap increases. It is these the guard cells of the stomata, they get the water due to the end osmosis. Water moves in to the cell sap of the guard cells. Because of this reason, the turgidity of the guard cell increases. When they become a turgid, they automatically open. Means what? The stomatal opening of the stomata takes place in this way. At night, they open the stomata because of the acid metabolism. At night, due to the accumulation of the acid in the cell cytoplasm, osmotic concentration of the cell sap increases. It takes up water from the subsidiary cells, so they become a turgid. Stomata open during a night time, at night time. So what happens during a daytime? Whatever the acid that it accumulates in the guard cells easily get converted into it undergo hydrolysis. It converted into saccharides. Okay, so the osmotic concentration of the cell sap decreases. Automatically they closes at the daytime. So this is also one of the important physiological adaptation of the xerophytes. I will stop here. I shall continue with the topic. This completes the study of internal adaptive characters of various xerophytes, physiological adaptations of various xerophytes. Thank you.